Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. Your host, as always, Jonny Torres. Happy Monday to you. Hope you're all doing well. Of course, there is no shortage of topics today, and we're going to try to touch on the most important ones. We appreciate you watching. In the meantime, you can go ahead and like, comment, and share this episode. We are live on Facebook and YouTube. And then don't forget, later on, we'll upload the audio version of our podcast to all the audio podcast platforms that are tech overlords at Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. So make sure you check out the audio version there. The audio version doing really strong. So thanks to everybody listening right now, whenever and wherever you may be doing so. Again, we thank you so much for watching. And as I mentioned, we do have a lot of topics. So we can go ahead and pull those up. We are going to start with maybe the most important topic that's happening right now in terms of a global crisis, as if we didn't have enough. But it would be the situation in Afghanistan as Kabul Falls. The leader in Afghanistan has since left the country in recent days. The Taliban had already taken over much of the country, and this was, of course, the last domino to fall. We'll dissect why this is happening and, of course, what the future of Afghanistan may look like, and, of course, how we got to this point. Our second topic is our Cuomo Farewell. The once beloved governor of New York has just gone down in flames more than anyone could imagine, whether it's the COVID deaths, which continue to be a mounting issue for him, and, of course, the sexual harassment cases that have been brought against him that could likely put him in jail. So we'll talk a little bit more about Governor Cuomo. And the DHS Terrorism Alert. You, I, everybody in this room, and those of you watching at home, you could be on the terrorism list very, very soon. We'll talk about why. Again, lots to talk about. If there's anything you'd like to add, hey to Hector, always on and ready in the comment section. Please let us know if there's anything else you'd like for us to touch on, and we're certainly going to incorporate your comments along the way. Now let's go to the main table. Joining us, a new face on the show. I always love having some new faces, but certainly not a new face to those of us who are active in the community. First of all, though, from right to left, we'll go with Anibal David Cabrera, as always, and that fresh face sitting there here in between us. That would be Harden Tripathi. Did I say it right? I would never try to.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely.
I'd never tried to say your last name. I was like, wait a second. I just realized it's probably the first time I've actually said it out loud.
Yep.
So, all right.
Well, thank you, sir.
So I nailed it.
Absolutely.
All right, cool.
You can call me Trip if it's a little easier for you.
All right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, thanks so much for being with us. To start the show, just to give everybody a little bit of background, tell us a little bit about yourself and, of course, some of your background. Of course, your what has brought you to the table today in terms of wanting to discuss today's politics, just to give people an idea of your perspective for tonight.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much. And I want to thank all the viewership here today who are listening in today and just kind of wanting to really understand what's going on in current affairs and what's going on around the globe. You know, a lot of these things that happen overseas, a lot of people just focus sometimes what's, the food on the table. Yeah. But sometimes what's really important is that certain situations overseas do affect us here locally. And global implications have local situations that are affected and vice versa. So first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for both of you all for having me here. And really glad to be here today. A little bit about myself. I'm an attorney. I'm from Lakeland, Florida, 863 area, and just really glad to be here because, honestly, I've traveled a lot. I've traveled all across the U.S. I hope I get to bring a little bit of flavor to this conversation today.
Sure.
Because, with everything going on right now, with respect to the Taliban, with respect to the Biden administration, with respect to global affairs, or the safety and security of our country here in the United States, and also just what goes on around the world. You probably wonder, well, why am I here today, right? I'm a new fresh face, but I'm glad I'm here because here's the thing. There's a lot of hardworking Americans and allies of Americans that day to day they actually provide a lot of value to our country and to the great American people. So my background is I am an attorney. I practice U.S. immigration nationality law. My name is Harden Tripathi. I go by Trip from Trip Law. And I know you both very well, so I just really appreciate it. You know, we've worked on a lot of things together, so I'm just glad that we're here.
Yeah, it's about
together.
time we had you on.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad I could be here. So, but no, what's really cool is, you know, I had a wonderful opportunity to be in D.C. You know, everyone says that's a swamp. It's, you know, that's a place you don't want to be. And it still is. Right? We all get it. But you know what? You learn a lot from the swamp, because the longer you're there, the more you kind of understand how it does affect the world, how it affects the United States. But also, the longer you're there, you tend to get away from where you're actually from.
Right.
I was actually born in India. I am an immigrant myself, and you know, I understand a lot of things that happen. Perspective is everything. And when you realize what's going on with these people overseas, you kind of tend to realize that this is going to be in our history books. 20 years from now, children will be reading about this moment that we are talking about here today. And one big thing I would just like to say is that I worked for the U.S. State Department. I had the opportunity to be at Washington, D.C., and work for the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs. I was within the Office of Afghanistan and Pakistan. And when you really are in those offices, you really see the nitty-gritty. You see what goes on behind the scenes. If you guys have ever watched Wizard of Oz, you'll probably see, you know, the person behind the curtain. You get to see how our government operates. You get to see how a room full of people, maybe 8 to 12 people, literally dictate U.S. foreign policy.
Wow.
So just glad I'm here. Maybe I can shed some light on that to our viewership.
Well, absolutely.
But it's a very amazing time to, you know, live, but also just to understand. So thank you for having me.
Well, and again, you know, they talk about each generation kind of having these pivotal moments, right? And so, like, for our parents, it was probably Vietnam. You know, for us, you know, it was, you know, for some of us it was 9/11. You know, and so maybe this may be that pivotal moment for the next generation. You know, because it's, you know, it's been now, you know, it's, well, there's been a lot of comparisons, right? So mostly because of the imagery to Vietnam. But, you know, we look at, you know, we've been dealing with a lot, the coronavirus and, you know, and other natural disasters. But really, in terms of foreign policy, I mean, it's been mostly fairly quiet, you know. Again, having to go back 20 years, you know, to our last truly, like, full-blown conflict. You know, though you could make the argument we've always been in conflict in Afghanistan, right? That's certainly what we're learning. And we're learning that, you know, and part of the reason we do this program is, and this touches on so many of the issues that we discuss, is that we're learning that you can't trust the government. You can't take them at their word. And even within the government, they don't even trust themselves. You know, when you heard time after time over the past 20 years that we were making progress, that things were getting better, that, you know, that they were almost ready, you know, to be able to take their country back. And honestly, even going back about 4 or 5 years when I was working for Senator Rubio, I talked to a government contractor who provides maintenance and repair work for helicopters in Afghanistan. And they were saying, look, these people are not ready. They're nowhere near ready. Like, you're talking about a country whose literacy rating, you might know better than I think is somewhere north of 70 to 80%. And so there are a lot of factors to why this happened. And truly, and I'm not defending him, but it would be unfair to solely pin this on Joe Biden. I think we can criticize the way it was handled, and maybe, you know, speculate that it could have been handled better. But given your background, I mean, what do you see? Let's first touch on some of the immediate repercussions that we're going to see coming out of this.
So that's a really great point that you just made. You know, we can't just pin this on the current president. You know, I'm someone who likes to give someone a chance at, you know, a bite at the apple. One big thing, and Anibal, I think you can maybe attest to this too, but one big thing is this has been something that's been going on for past presidencies, many, many different presidencies. But this is not just about the United States. It's about the whole global world and how it all affects. I mean, if you really understand your history, history does repeat itself. And you really brought up a great point. You brought up, you know, a lot of different historical components to your argument and to your discussion. One thing was the Viet Cong. The Viet Cong is what we see now in our day and age as the Taliban. And ultimately, when you see the imagery, the pictures, you see everything that goes on, ultimately you got to realize the history. How did we get here? So I loved your question about now what do you see forward, but to our viewership, do they understand the history of why we are here? Because once you realize why we are here, we hopefully learn from our history. We hopefully, history does repeat itself. When I was a little tot, still, short guy, little tot still, but, at the end of the day, I just say, you always learn that at the end of the day, history does repeat itself. From a legal perspective, from a policy perspective, from a national security perspective, you really put all of it together, you shake it up, and you have this wonderful opportunity to really understand how life works and how foreign policy works. And one big thing is you have to look at the history lessons that we learned from what happened in the Viet Cong type era during the Cold War. If you really look at kind of the Cold War and you look at 1979 and you look at the Mujahideen was a group of rebels. It was like guerrillas. These were people who were tired of people invading their country. I think every group, no matter what country you're a part of, you have every sovereign right to ultimately be in your country and have the freedom and the values that you desire based on your country.
Right.
But there's a lot of cultural context. There's also things involving Islam. There's a lot of things involving a lot of people who come from different countries, like the Soviet Union back in 1979 and the Mujahideen. You got to look at what the Bush administration did. You also have to look at kind of what happened with respect to people who are always invading. You got to look at the Ottomans and all these different, there's so much history prior to 1979 we can go into.
Sure.
But under this session, I'm going to keep it very short and sweet. Because here's the thing, how do you explain to someone what's the global crisis and how will this affect the regional and geopolitical issues that we have on a day-to-day? And one thing we learn at the State Department is that at the end of the day, it's like one domino falls, it affects so many other dominoes. Mm-hmm. I'm sure we've all seen where one domino falls and you see this whole artwork, but this is just a travesty what's going on right now.
Right.
I'm an immigrant. I moved here from India. You all probably understand what it's like in other countries because at the end of the day, we have it very sweet here. I have clients literally every day that they're just happy to have drawers. I had a call today and I had a gentleman from Mexico who is just so happy he has drawers and a pillow to sleep on when he used to not have that.
Yeah, I was having this conversation this week, which is that we here in the United States, most people, unless you've traveled outside of the United States, which again, not the majority of the country, has never truly witnessed poverty, like true poverty.
Sheer poverty.
Yeah, where you see children that are on the street, seeing famine, you've seen people begging for food and money, and in the way that it is quite literally their last hope of survival. It's one of those things where we're blessed, as they say, to have some of the most overweight homeless people in the world. You know what I mean? There are resources here that you don't find in other countries. And most of the countries, whether it's India or whether it's Colombia, you're going to see children either selling themselves or selling things on the street. They're high on paint or whatever kind of things they can get their hands on. So we're very spoiled in that sense. I like the saying that we are the 1%. Mm-hmm. We're the global 1%. Because we don't see that level of poverty. We don't witness it on a daily basis, as is the case through, I would say, the majority of the world, really.
So now that Americans are seeing what is happening on the ground, they're very shocked and appalled, really, of the aftermath that's occurring at the moment on the ground in Afghanistan and what's happening in Kabul. We talked about this a little bit last week, that I'm not surprised that the capital fell as quickly as it did. I'm not surprised that the provincial capitals and capital cities fell as quickly as they did. And then to think about what the president talked about just a few months ago, saying that it could take up to 90 days for the capital to fall when it fell in 7 or 8 days. I think what a lot of Americans are thinking about, like, how did we get to this point? I don't think anyone's surprised that we are withdrawing our troops out. I think a lot of Americans are wanting to know, like, what happened to where they're seeing thousands of people, almost like a scene from the World War Z, where people are trying to get onto planes that are taking off, and then the video of people falling off of those planes when they're in the middle of the air because they weren't able to hold on anymore. So those are very tragic pictures that Americans are seeing, and they're very upset and they want to know who lied to them, because that's what we're hearing now. It's what we're seeing on social media is who lied to the American people to make them think that, okay, there was an army, there was some kind of government, and all of that melted away in 7 days. To make them think that.
Sorry.
So absolutely. So he brought a great point up. When you look at what happened, history repeats itself. This happened in the past administration with the Kurds, right? And now we're looking at kind of what's going on with respect to the Kurds. Now we're looking at what's going on to the Afghans. And you know, you really look at it, you know, when I was at the State Department, we really focused on gender equality. We looked at all these different, you know, these terms of art that people like to spit out, but we really did it. We were there. You would get cables, you would get emails, you would get, with clearances, you would actually see what's going on. Unfortunately, what has happened, why are we here? It's because of a lack of leadership, I think. And I really do think that the current administration they have the right, I think they have really the right mentality in mind in terms that they want to help these people. But when you're a career politician, such as Joe Biden, or if you're someone who has done this forever and ever, and you're sitting on the Iron Throne over there in D.C., you tend to lose a little bit of that humanity. You don't really, it's just another day at work.
Well,
you know?
and would you agree that, you know, part of the failure in Afghanistan was really the fact that we didn't really have much business being there in the first place? You know, we should have gone in, gotten bin Laden, and gotten out. That really anything beyond that, I mean, because what we essentially did is we didn't really go in with the full force that we needed to do to truly take out the Taliban. And Joe Wicker, right here, who's said it many times on this show, we don't have, I think, the appetite anymore. We don't have we're maybe too sensitive nowadays to the fallout of war, you know, to truly do what needs to be done to eradicate an evil like the Taliban, much like we did with the Nazis in World War II.
I think
where you truly have to go in and with everything you have, just eradicate the enemy. And yeah, there's going to be innocent casualties. There's going to be major catastrophic damage to infrastructure, you know. But I think this kind of softer approach where, oh, you got to be careful with schools and hospitals and, you know, and certain locations and certain people. I think that's when, again, you're leaving yourself open to a prolonged effort like Afghanistan.
But you're making the comparison of the Taliban to the German government, and it's not the case. You're having an Islam, and again, the caliphate's going to come back. I think they said Friday is when they're going to announce that they're going to become an emirate, and so you already have that situation where I would not compare the Taliban, even in 2001. To a European regime of some kind. It wasn't a standing army.
No, I'm just saying that when we had the opportunity to truly eradicate them, we didn't do what was necessary to do that.
We didn't do what was necessary in Vietnam. We didn't do what was necessary in North Korea. I mean, I don't think Americans have had the stomach for that kind of what's necessary war in a very long time. Also,
either that or it's simply a problem of hey, we can certainly take down governments, but we have a problem taking down these kind of terrorist militia groups like the Viet Cong, you know, which again, not a government organization, the Taliban, right? Al Qaeda, you know, those kind of groups, Hamas, right? Where again, there's not a lot of structure there, you know, that you can really go after, you know, and so I think that maybe that's maybe a weakness, you know, militarily.
I wouldn't say it's a weakness. I would say that we're in the business of nation building. And unfortunately, that's not the way that I think most Americans, resonate with, because nation building is always for those globalist elites. Those are for people who want to have, you know, power within those respective regions. Yeah. However, I believe that what's actually most important is not nation building, but it's to those humanitarian values, those sustainable development goals, the United Nations, NATO. We've seen everything, all these different organizations, but it's not about nation building. It's not about nation building. It's more about sustainable development goals. It's about actually how do we make sure that we promulgate American values and democracy. We are a republic, but we do tend to think that with what's going to happen now to all these poor women out there who are not going to get educated. Now, there are some Taliban regions that do allow young girls to get an education, but that's not all. To a point. But still, it's so... you know, it's so limited.
But there was even still, I mean, again, you know, there was some of those atrocities were still taking place, even while, you know, the American military was spread throughout.
Yeah, but you didn't have gays being thrown off of buildings in the middle of Kabul.
Well, no, but again, you still had, you know, women and young women and girls who were being sexually assaulted, you know, and they were, and oftentimes, you know, at least by some reports, you know, by some of the people we were working with. To try to stave off, you know, the Taliban's movement, you know, and so I want to kind of turn the conversation over, you know, really to the fact that, so President Trump had originally put in place the peace agreement between the Taliban and the United States, which really was kind of what started the timer on this de-escalation and our exit, right? So the Trump administration was originally, again, they had already started the process, and Trump being Trump, was critical, I guess, as to kind of how this was all handled. I think if I had been him, I would have said, "Hey, that's a great idea. Glad I thought of it." But obviously, given the way that it's kind of backfired, not really backfired. I think that the Biden administration is, especially Biden himself, has been in government long enough to know that this was going to be ugly no matter what.
Yeah, but ugly at a point. What? No one. I don't think.
I don't think there's any way that you could have exited the country.
No one's. But
and
there is a way. Are you telling me that you removed the last 2,500 military agents in a country, but yet still had 10,000 U.S. citizens in the country, not thinking that this was going to become a problem, and 80,000 Afghans that helped us during the occupation? That wasn't, no one, you had 15 months to get your shit together, and it never occurred to anyone. No one is saying that it's a bad idea to get out of Afghanistan. Yeah. From the left and to the right, everyone has the same position that we needed to get out of Afghanistan. Right. It's the 20-year anniversary, we need to get out. But no one is denying that point, but everyone is saying that it's a clear sign of the incompetence that this administration has had to show that no one had thought ahead of time that it was inappropriate to remove the military, but not inappropriate to get rid of to remove the citizens at the same time. You couldn't do a slow withdrawal of the 10,000 U.S. Americans on the ground. And again, what happens with again, it literally looks like a World War Z episode at the Kabul airport. We've lost both of our military bases there. There are Humvees and drones, and I mean, if anything, Biden is more willing to give guns to Afghanistan than to the U.S. citizens. And so, what else are we supposed to do at this moment? We see that the complete incompetence. He was in Camp David? Well, the last 6 days. Doing nothing.
Well, that to me, I think, was the biggest sign more than anything that they knew that this was going to go bad.
Oh, yeah.
Because not only did Biden, pretty much go MIA. I mean, sure, we knew he was going to be up in Connecticut, and then from there he was going to go to Camp David, but he was essentially MIA. He wasn't making himself available to the press or anything.
Well, he's been MIA since he got into Hey, we know when his naps and we know when his cookies. Oh, we're not wrapping up.
The biggest tell was also Jen Psaki, which to me, anytime a spokesperson all of a sudden goes on vacation for a while, that to me, that's a sign that traditionally means like your time is up. Like she may be on her way out.
It's about.
I think and I truly believe that. I don't think Jen Psaki is going to be around in the White House much longer. Especially at this juncture, with such a global event happening, whether it's the earthquake in Haiti or what's happening in Afghanistan. The fact that there's virtually no one in the White House right now. I mean, as far as, people that should be answering questions and should be, facing the press.
Yeah, and they're not going to give Kamala that kind of responsibility.
Well, here's what I
Well, that's a whole nother topic.
Here's what I want to say. You brought a good point, right? Like when things get really tough, you got to be there. You're the face of the nation. You're the face of the nation. At the end of the day, when you're the face of the nation, you have to show up, especially during times of distress. And one big thing I saw was at Bagram Air Force Base, right over there in Bagram. The problem that we had was now we are literally giving military technology. You are seeing our taxpayer dollars ultimately funding Taliban members now, where to a point where if you look at kind of what ISIL, like we're not even talking about Boko Haram, we're not talking about ISIS, ISIL. They're literally fundamentally changing the Constitution and the rights that free people have in Afghanistan, and they're completely doing it with our taxpayer dollars. But it is our fault to an extent. I will play devil's advocate here.
It's definitely our fault.
I think that when 9/11 happened, there was a certain sentiment. I was very young at that point. I was in 6th grade. I was 11 years old at that time. I remember in 2001, 11 years old, 31 now. But I remember that moment when the towers crumbled. And there was a national sentiment. I mean, you got to realize it's an act of war.
Oh, people signed up the following day.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Yes, we went through a 20-year war, but then you got to look at all the procurement that went on behind the scenes, the weapons industry, all the contractors who made all the money. We were there. I mean, I was there in D.C. when there were rooms full of people, and there was probably about 8 to 12 people dictating Afghanistan policy. People that were 31 to like maybe 45. And these are the people actually shaping policy that affects our soldiers, right?
Yeah.
Our Marines, right? And our airmen. And they always have this mantra, right? That it's like the older people, you know, want to call the war, but the young people have to suffer. There are people who have literally fought, and they have served their country. For what? Now we are waiting, what, like after 20 years, we just suddenly leave? And yes, look, President Trump said the same thing, to play devil's advocate, because I have a lot of friends who are Democrats as well, and they always say the same thing, and maybe in conservative-minded, I get it. But there's a system, there's a protocol. Yes, we should not be in the business of nation building.
Right.
We should not be in the business of, being involved in a country's civil war. We should focus on the efforts here at home. However, there are people, though, that we should protect. And it has geopolitical issues. We should be there, but we shouldn't just leave abruptly. There should be a strategic plan. We should know that military technology is not being left in the hands of a terrorist.
Well, and that's where the previous administration responsibility ends and Joe Biden starts, which is really what's transpired over the past few months, right? Because they had the timeline. They knew that they were supposed to get ready to get out of there. Now, some people are saying that the generals may have done this intentionally to try to get an extension of the deadline. But what people are forgetting is that the peace agreement would have expired, and now you're once again putting American lives at stake.
But I push back on that, because the ceasefire agreement had already been breached back in June, when the Taliban had already started moving into the provincial capitals surrounding the southern and northern borders. So it's not like they were doing what they were supposed to do. That was already encroaching.
No, but they knew that we were going to adhere to it at the very least, and we weren't going to engage.
And this is my issue. Why on earth are you deciding to evacuate during the height of fighting season? Why don't you do it in the winter, when no one does anything in the winter of Afghanistan, because it's too cold and there's no fighting in the winter? This wasn't thought through at all. And again, this isn't the original timeline. It was pushed back when the Biden administration came into play. And this was the only thing of the Trump administration that Biden took over. Because he's like, oh, this is what was given to me from a prior president. Not the Paris Accord, not the Iranian deal, not killing Keystone.
Yeah.
He could have chosen to either do something with this, and he extended it. He hasn't wanted to.
Well, as they say, that the internet never forgets.
Oh, never forgets.
And there's a tweet out there where he basically says that he was going to take personal responsibility for anything that happened under his administration, that he wasn't going to blame previous administrations for any of his failures.
But that's what's happening.
Firing thing he does, is go ahead
and look at what
Trump
Secretary Blinken's doing, right?
Oh, Lord.
So let's talk about Secretary Blinken for a little bit. And Secretary Blinken, if he's listening and watching this, I wish he really heard this. Because,
share and comment below.
Because here's the thing. Secretary Blinken, he comes from he's a career, diplomat. I mean, this gentleman has always been, and he has a lot of knowledge. But here's what you got to look at. Under Mike Pompeo, who was a CIA director, he was Secretary of State, there was good leadership. They actually did have plans. And I have Democrats who argue with me all the time. I have friends of mine, colleagues, professionals who argue. I mean, these are your career diplomats. However, one thing I would always like to say is this. It's not about the fact that we all are we're Americans. Like, I don't want this to all be like Republicans versus Democrats or what. Look, we're all one America. Like, we're Americans. We want to see the best for our values in those countries, because here's the thing. How those people live and what values we espouse onto them over there affects our livelihoods over here in these great United States of America. And my big issue is this. Secretary Blinken, he literally had the right idea. He just ended up executing it incorrectly, because it's a puppet government right now. It is a puppet shadow government. And I think Kamala Harris, which, she literally is a better senator than she is a vice president. I will give her that. She's a great Congress member. However, she is not a really great vice president.
Yeah.
And here's why. If you looked at her approval ratings and whatnot.
What are you talking about?
And hear me out. I'm being fair here.
Oh, I'm being
here's my
facetious.
thing. Yeah, I know, exactly. But hear me out. Hear me out. This is what's crazy about it. How do you give the leader of the free world, who basically rarely comes out, it's a shadow government. If you really think about it, the handlers are the ones who are handling it. If you live in D.C. long enough, you know who really has the power. It's the people with the money. The people with the money control the politicians, because they want to get reelected. And then at the end of the day, the American people are the ones who get compromised. And I just think that's so horrible, because at the end of the day, we are tax-paying Americans. And we do care about these Afghans because here's the reason. Those Afghans, when you are involved in intelligence work, national security work, you understand that this is a global team effort. America did not become this country that it did become without the aid of other people. And those Afghans out there that we left, just like we did the Kurds under the Trump administration, and I will say it, or just like under the Obama administration, that we left all the Uyghur population over there in China. I mean, this goes global. Yeah. I mean, I think national security and policy is difficult, yes, but we need to have execution. We need to have plans in place. And unfortunately, this administration has had so many blunders in a quarter of their presidents. We still have 3 more years, folks.
We're only 8 months in.
Yeah, 3 more years of this.
Right.
And that's why I'm so glad that the American people are waking up and that they are realizing that at the end of the day, we cannot get away with this. We are global leaders. But I feel like because we don't have a backbone in this administration, that we are losing. I think our allies like the United Kingdom, Australia, France, all these people, Canada, they're also moving out. Because of what America did, Boris Johnson recently just was upset. And that affects their parliament. That affects our way of life.
Sure.
And I am just so disappointed that our leadership...
Because they're much closer to the problem.
Correct. Well, and now, you know what's going to end up happening? The Chinese, our biggest global threat is the Chinese. I will say it over and over again. China is literally buying up real estate and land in Africa, in the islands, in literally next to Miami, like literally all those Hispaniola and all, they're buying up property.
Right.
China, the CCP, is the most dangerous organization to the United States national security, in my personal opinion. And I really think what we did without having a strategy plan, by giving weapons, by giving military equipment to the Taliban without any action, any sort of thought, you would think that career politicians, career diplomats would have the wherewithal to ultimately be better. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's our taxpayer dollar, it's our lives at stake. And I think we just crumbled as a nation because now we are going to have another 9/11. Mark my words, hear this, because when the Taliban, who literally let out Al-Qaeda, 5,000 people they let out in all these, in Bagram Air Force Base, where we had our prisoners. They literally let out 5,000 to 7,000 people. Do you think America's safer because of that?
Right.
Hell no. And I will stick by that because here's why. We're going to have another one of these because we have poor leadership in the White House and the American people did vote for this man. So, because he's under the guise of a career diplomat who's supposed to be a stable man, a career senator,
one of the Taliban leaders that were sitting in the presidential palace 2 days ago was in Guantanamo Bay because he was held under captivity, and you see him now in front of the palace. It's absolutely insane how we've allowed this to happen.
Which Democrats have always advocated, for the closure of Guantanamo. But here we see a perfect reason why, those guys need to stay incarcerated.
Right.
It's because they're just going to go right back to these organizations. And in fact, now they probably know a lot more about the American process, when you become a prisoner of war, than they did going in there. So, final question to kind of wrap up the topic.
I expected the collapse as quickly as it did when you start to hear that the soldiers and police officers that were protecting the Capitol hadn't got paid in 8 months, in 6 months. How would you expect an army to fight if they're not getting paid?
Well, again, the corruption.
The money doesn't go down to them. The money goes down to the politicians that we're propping up. And all of a sudden, when things hit the fan, they're the first ones on jets. The warlords they left the country as soon as it collapsed.
Let me talk about the warlords real quick. So when I was at the State Department, there's a thing called the Fatah region. It's called the Federally Administered Tribal Areas, the Fatah.
Isn't it the northern part of it?
Yeah, the northern. And literally, if you look at Al-Qaeda, you look at the Taliban, they actually controlled the south from the late 70s all the way through the 80s and 90s when 9/11 happened in 2001 all the way forward. And now you see a president like Ghani flee to Uzbekistan and leave his people there. I mean, you just have a complete government just completely in shambles.
Black hole.
No, it dissolves.
And you need to have a leadership, especially if we take responsibility for that region. I know we're not in the business of nation building, but we are. That's what we've been doing.
If you're there for 20 years, you're building a nation.
Yes. And
That's
so
what's
you know
happening.
what you need to do? You can't just leave. It's like basically if you have a family and you raise a child, you don't just leave them and run away to another state. You take care of your fam, you take care of your people, you take care of these Afghan translators, you take care of these Afghan intelligence agencies. That, you know, these people who have been in the intelligence, you got to work. You can't just abruptly.
You don't think Taiwan is looking at what our response? You don't think Hong Kong is seeing? You don't think South Korea?
And China's going to win out of this.
No. China's going to get sucked into another example of 20 years in Afghanistan.
Well, they'll form an alliance. They'll probably form an alliance.
Well, you already see the Russians are already, to this day, from this moment we're having this conversation, the Russians have already brokered peace deals with the Taliban right now. And fact check that, because here's the thing. The Russians and the Chinese are our two biggest adversaries. And right now, because of what President Biden has done, I think Americans are going to be weaker as a result. Sure. And it's going to affect oil. It's going to affect GDP. It's going to affect net.
Well, that was going to be.
I don't know about that.
That was going to be.
We'll talk about it.
Well, that was going to be my question to kind of close the topic: is how long before this becomes a true issue? Where
it already is.
You know.
No, we're finished.
I mean, in terms of another terrorist attack, because obviously according to some of the stuff I've read and listened to, I mean, again, the Taliban very smartly negotiated, using that term very lightly, around the entire country, basically for this whole thing to kind of turn in their favor as quickly as possible. For the army to give up, for everybody to kind of to flee the country, the people that were, it was either play ball or if you're going to get in our way, then we're going to take your life, right?
These are narco-terrorists. They don't play by the rules.
So, right, exactly. So how many years do you think it'll be before this becomes a terrorist?
No, I don't know about that. I think the conversation needs to be had. Will the Taliban allow for those organizations to reposition themselves back into that country? Now, do I think it's going to be a year or two for them?
Well, they themselves. I mean, how long before they themselves decide to?
Well, no, the Taliban weren't the ones that attacked us. The Taliban that facilitated the terrorists out of those camps to attack us.
Right.
So that's what occurred in that side. I don't want to go into that rabbit hole that we're going to get into because we're already getting we've gone long in this conversation.
Pakistan, their ISI, their intelligence organization, comparable to our CIA, they were the same ones who actually funded them. We funded the Mujahideen to fight the Soviets, and then once that happened and Soviets left, then we ended up putting up this proxy empire. Now we taught Bin Laden how to fly planes in Florida, for God's sake. I think the American government needs to do a better job of holding themselves accountable, not at the expense of the American people.
We were told year upon year upon year from military generals that everything is fine. We're going to win in 6 months. We're going to win in a year. Kept on lying to us. There needs to be investigations on which general and which agencies were lying to us. Because
it goes back to every problem we're having right now.
Joe Biden was under the impression it would take 90 days for Kabul to fall when it fell in 7. Like that is a huge error.
Well, and he didn't even say that it was a likelihood. It was said it was a possibility. But he still maintained that somehow that the government and the army was going to, stay in place.
So who's lying to the president? Again,
well, they all are.
Grandpa only knows so much as CNN tells them.
Well, and again, so our favorite podcast, so Breaking Points was talking about how, again, this has been decades of colonels and top brass leadership of our military lying to the executive branch, lying to the intelligence agencies about what's actually happening on the ground. And that in some cases, it's the military complex, wanting to perpetuate this because so many people were making money off.
Yeah, what's happening now is Biden's fault, is the administration's fault. When you have 10,000 American citizens, 80,000 translators, people that work with the U.S. over the years that need to get taken out. Yeah. And a week prior, before the collapse, you remove the military. So instead of you having 2,500 military there, now you have 6,000 military personnel there because you were unable to organize this. That's now. Everyone's upset because of that now. But you've had 2 Republican administrations, 2 Democrat administrations, and a vice president and now president that has been in office that knew all of this was happening. So again, both sides is wrong in this situation. When CNN is attacking the president, this current president, and like laughing down administrators from the White House, you know you have a problem. When CNN is against you, like I don't know how else you're gonna come from that.
I want to end it,
but predictably though, because again, they have to save face in all of this too, and there's really no way to defend the situation that's happening.
CNN, it looks phenomenal. What CNN looks like,
but they've also been ignoring the whole problem in Afghanistan now again for the better part of the past 20 years.
John, I would just like to end it with one note, because I know there's other topics as well. But one big thing I want to say is I don't want to politicize the situation. What I want to do is I want to talk about the Afghans in those regions, people that I worked with when I was in the State Department, people that are on the floor, boots on the ground, our people, our military, our civilians, our intelligence officers, people there that worked with the actual cream of the crop brass of the Afghan government. At the end of the day, when you have, if you look at Afghanistan, the reason why we can never win is because of the geographic nature of Afghanistan.
Correct.
There's mountains, there's tribal regions, there's so much land. This is a Mesopotamian region that historically has never been conquered, really.
Right.
And so one thing I would say is, yes, we can all sit here and have our perspectives on it. But when you actually look at the actual people, the people is what it's important about, the Afghan people, these children.
Yeah.
We could sit here, all of us are going to go home tonight and get on our pillows, and we're going to go comfortably sleep under AC and heat and all that. Well, not these people. We see this in Syria. We see it in China. We see it all over. But
where do you think they go?
Afghans
Where do they try to go?
The ones who are really, and they're refugees. There's been dissettlement.
Sure,
they are
but
leaving.
where? Like, what countries do you think are primarily going to be affected by this?
Pakistan will definitely get affected. I think you're going to see a lot of people moving over to Pakistan, which is going to cost more. It's going to cause more cultural rifts.
Yeah.
It's going to cause more influx of mass migration. It's going to cause an instability. Government's not going to be able to handle that. They're not America. They can't we even have struggles with border security here.
Yeah.
How do you think Pakistan's going to handle it? How do you think that Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, how do you think all those areas around those areas, how are they going to handle it? You're going to see people moving towards Egypt. You're going to see mass migration to Europe now.
Sure.
People are going to flee by any means necessary. Here, we just want a good way of life. Over there, they're just trying to survive.
We've allowed an entire generation to grow up in Afghanistan thinking that we were going to be there for the long haul. And the fact that we pulled out,
20 years is a long haul.
Well, you had
and there was no signs of.
You literally had female aristocrats and academics opening up at Kabul University a gender study. Like, these people thought we were going to have some kind of stability for a while. If you literally had people signing up for classes, females were signing up for classes.
Yeah, but again, the reality was that we weren't making any progress.
Yeah, but the reality also was that it wasn't going to fall. Like, they actually thought it wasn't going to fall. And when you pull the Americans out from the air support, it all fell apart because there was no leadership there, and the corruption was crazy. Again, this isn't a Japan.
It was all smoke and mirrors for the Americans.
Oh, completely.
It was all
because Americans don't care.
Right.
Again, we are going to go home. We are going to sleep in our pillows, and we're going to in the air conditioning, not the heat. I don't know where you're coming from, but Americans don't.
It's kind of cold here in Florida sometimes too.
But Americans don't care. We do not care what happens around the rest of the world.
Disconnected from it. Well,
we don't even trade around the world. I mean, I think only 20% or 20 or 30% of our GDP is generated from outside sources.
Well,
the majority of our money is made
that
here.
Doesn't mean anything.
Exactly.
But to me, the most, and I'll kind of close the topic on this, which to me the most horrifying images I've seen so far has actually been the C-10, heading down the runway, being chased by what looked like
a mob,
100 or 200 people, and as it's taking off, you see people falling off of the plane.
Thousands of feet.
People that had actually somehow managed to hold on to this plane. I don't know what they were thinking.
And the pilots knew what they were doing, but they had to get out.
They had to
get out.
Yeah, there's
saddest part. It reminds me of when 9/11 happened, and you saw people jumping off the balcony.
Well,
like, that is horrible.
If that plane had stopped, forget it. It's never taking off.
No.
Yeah.
And they know that. They're trained for those kind of situations.
Of course.
But to witness it, because again, we are so desensitized by the media, that really the social media is actually pulling back the curtain on a lot of the filters that the media has put in place. And that's another reason why we don't perceive these conflicts the way that other parts of the world do. Because even the BBC, for that matter, is far more true to its reporting when it comes to situations like this. And we're incredibly coddled when it comes to our media coverage, especially about foreign conflicts like this. So.
And this is why I think we need people who are going to be in leadership positions that are going to actually change the narrative. And you know, people like Scott Franklin, Congressman Franklin, he's done a great job. Former naval aviator. You get people like Ron DeSantis. I mean, these are people who are JAG officers that had foreign policy experience. I think the American people really need to wake up and really understand that you need leadership that is going to have a spine.
Yeah.
Right.
And not have no backbone.
The world wants strong leadership. The world doesn't want grandpa taking a nap from 3 to 8 p.m. It doesn't work like that. When you have a bigger regimen about your cookies and the milk, it's going to be a problem every single time, and the world will take advantage.
All right. We went incredibly long on that issue, but of course it certainly warranted it because we're certainly not done with it either. I mean, this is something that's going to continue to evolve and transpire over the coming weeks. I believe we might have Joe Wicker back next week, who is a veteran and I believe was in Afghanistan during one of his deployments. And so we're going to talk about his perspective next week when he joins us back here on the show. But I want to appreciate and thank Robin, Hector, Laura, everybody who's watching today and engaging in the comment section. We really appreciate it. I mean, again, great points being made here. It's just unbelievable what's happening over in Afghanistan. And again, I mean, it's truly sad. I mean, we're being affected directly by this, you know, by even some of our friends, you know, who have family members and extended friends, you know, who are there in various roles and are now trying to find ways to make it back to the United States. So we'll keep you updated on that issue as it continues to evolve.
Yeah, we're definitely going to see the humanitarian fallout to this. And I think a lot of Americans are going to be put in positions where they're going to get a phone call from someone that helped them when they were there,
right?
When their sons or daughters were there. And they're going to want to figure out ways to get out. We know friends now that have friends that were interpreters or those that were helping them on the ground, that they're trying to figure out ways to get in contact with them because they know they're at the Air Force Base or they're at the air station, whatever, there, and they're trying to get them out. So again, this is a huge humanitarian crisis that should never have happened. This should never have happened this way.
My thing is just a lack of responsibility of handling the withdrawal of service members and just the people that helped us.
Well, it's a big leadership failure.
The fact, at the end of the day, is we lost trust with our allies.
Yeah.
We lost trust with those hardworking people who served our country and passed away and died because they were protecting our nation and they were giving values overseas that we were supposed to espouse. And all of that for nil.
Well, and again, we've lost a generation of credibility when it comes to our military intervention, because now, think about it, who's going to want to go into China to do anything about the Uyghur situation?
Look at Taiwan.
You know, who's going to, look at Venezuela, look at Cuba. We have no leverage now internationally to do anything on those fronts because of this, you know, because we're going to be held to this standard. We're going to be held, and this is going to be a reflection of our leadership for many years.
It takes generations for us to rebuild a foreign policy that works. And every American president, besides, honestly, Papa Bush, was the last time we had a president that actually knew something about foreign policy.
Yeah.
And we continue to fall on the same sword every single cycle, that we elect a president that has no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, after Vietnam, I mean, it really wasn't until Reagan, you know, came into office, you know, that we had to do something about what was happening in Russia, and he was willing to do it, and you know, it was kind of, you know, if we didn't do it, nobody would, you know, but I mean, think about that gap, really, you know, that took place, you know, between those two administrations for us to have any kind of international foreign policy credibility.
And isn't it crazy that under the Trump administration, we had literally, there was a moment where Bahrain,
oh my God,
and you had literally like the Middle East, you had Middle East and you know, Israel and all those flags waving and side to side.
You had unity.
You literally had Jared Kushner, who's a real estate mogul, handle policy better than this current administration with Secretary Blinken. You had people literally like Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan who were outside the box.
Yeah.
Well, because they didn't worry about the political fallout from it. You know, same reason that they were able to move the embassy to Jerusalem. They were not concerned over the political fallout of the decisions. It was about doing the right thing and reaching the goal and accomplishing what you set out to accomplish.
And I know we don't negotiate with terrorists. We understand that. But you know what's really awesome? President Trump, under his administration, his leadership, was one of the few presidents that actually had a sit down with the Taliban. And they were
Right.
actually working on a brokered peace deal. Unfortunately, it stopped short at 4 years. If it had been another 4, this would have been completely held differently.
Because
But
the
you know what's-
Taliban knew that if they did not abide by the treaty, they would have got blown out of the air.
Yeah.
Where again, you had the Taliban pushing through in the middle of June, going through capitals around the southern parts of Afghanistan.
Yeah, but again,
breaching the agreement.
there wasn't the political will
Trump would have,
or resources.
Trump would have sent military back in if they were not abiding by it. That's the reason why the whole Vietnam situation happened. The treaty was signed in '63. So we had a few years of a buffer before Saigon fell.
Yeah, I know, but in Afghanistan, I don't think there was the political will to actually, again, double down. I think they called our bluff, and we
have a general
right
now.
With Biden, yes.
We literally have a general right now who's more worried about critical race theory here than they are about geopolitical stability
and climate
in
change.
the Middle East and climate change.
Yeah.
And so when you have values that the American people are not used to that are being pushed on us, and you have things where you're talking about gender equality over there versus systemic racism here, which is something that's also important. But this is a military. You got to use force. What happened to those gentlemen and the lovely young ladies out there who are our service members and leaders who are actually caring about what the Department of Defense is supposed to do versus ultimately talking about critical race theory?
All right. Well, we ended up getting back into the topic, but let's go ahead and try to get out of this by reminding you to not only like, share, comment this episode, but also make sure you subscribe to the audio version of our podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. As far as the audio version of our podcast, you can pick that up at the Tech Overlords at Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. So you can take it with you wherever you may want to go, even if it is Afghanistan. Let's go ahead into our next topic and kind of bring it back to the homeland as we start to say our farewell to Andrew W. Cuomo. I don't even know what his middle name is. But, for such a powerful family, I mean, is there been any other in recent memory that I can't think of somebody of a family of such stature that has had a bigger crash and burn right now than the Cuomos?
The man married into the Kennedy family, the dynasty. Like
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he married the sister of the late Kennedy that died in an airplane crash, and so. It's fascinating to see how this has occurred. I know we talked about this last week, that we didn't think he was going to resign. I was the only one that said that he would resign.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to throw that out there as a quasi.
I thought the whole process.
I didn't think he was going to resign.
I knew he was going to resign.
I thought it was going to take a little longer, but yeah, I didn't think it was going to be so quick.
As soon as I realized that it's actually happened before, that governors in New York have resigned and have been sent to jail, it's a really likelihood that it was going to happen. And Albany is like a cesspool. I mean, it's really like Rome before Caesar got stabbed. I mean, that's the kind of like cesspool that Albany has a reputation for. So I wasn't expecting him to last as long as people thought he was going to, and then that he might still get tried and go to prison and still kicked out, because people keep on forgetting that he has about, I think, $2 to $3 million sitting in a PAC that he can always run again. So for people that really want to make sure that he's done and gone, they're gonna file articles of impeachment, and they should file for articles of impeachment.
And the Assembly did. The New York State Assembly was really pushing that. So if you really look at impeachment as a goal, and I hope our viewership understands impeachment, it's a two-part process. Mm-hmm. It's like a trial of sorts. And
because
impeachment's one part.
They still might go through with it.
They should go through it.
And so, quick poll. Does he actually face trial and see it through, or do you think he settles and gets away with it?
Civilly, he'll go to trial. Politically, he will not. Him resigning, I think, saved him political endangerment. Yeah. But I think he's pissed off those women so much that they're going to file, that they've already started filing lawsuits.
Well, because the one thing that New Yorkers, and certainly the New York media, which is the majority of, what we call our mainstream media, has always kind of defended him, right? Mm-hmm. They tried to defend him with COVID and talked about what a great leader he was, right? Obviously, that was a farce.
He became
killed thousands of people. Right. Had a book deal that failed, just brilliantly failed.
But cash that check.
Oh yeah, I think it was a $5 million bonus or signing deal for that book. That I think barely sold 100,000 copies, and then they were trying to say, oh well, he was great on infrastructure. Well, conveniently he happened to change the Tripathi Bridge name to his dad's name.
I just want to talk about corruption. Think about corruption.
It's all about corruption.
And so, well, that was my point. Essentially, that on every front, his administration was a complete failure. Because
the appearance, the media will always back him. And
the perception was the complete opposite.
Yeah, and the harassment is horrible. We all agree on that. But you know what's even also is worse? It's the fact that the nursing homes that he was involved in.
That's not what brought him down. That's
not what brought him down. It was the harassment because the whole
death of New York. Yeah, the death of New Yorkers is not what brought him down.
Right.
It was the.
You can get with killing thousands and thousands of people in New York, but as soon as you do something which is still equally wrong, you shouldn't be touching women in that way. But it's so sad that it took that thing for the American people to realize, and the media always protects Democrats. Let's be honest about that. And if this had happened, let's say Don, Trump Jr., whatever, that would have been a whole story.
You keep on hearing, well, Trump has touched the Justice Man, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, he never had any allegations while he was in office. This is the difference. You, as a private citizen, dating, everything else, is your thing.
Yeah.
You being a civil servant, being paid by the U.S. government as a elected official, taking that power and abusing it by harassing, groping, touching, kissing, whatever he did. What ended my situation with Cuomo was the news conference where he was wearing a white polo and you can see the nipple rings. That's when it went way too far. And last year, around this time last year, they were saying people were Cuomo-sexuals. That was if you hashtag Cuomo-sexual, one, I'll judge you, and two, you will see the plethora of the media that absolutely loved Cuomo. Trevor Noah. He changed his Twitter handle or his Tinder saying that he was a Cuomo-sexual.
But that's how ridiculous it got. Cuomo's brother, the younger one, Andrew Cuomo, right? The younger brother.
Sure.
He literally
CNN anchor.
CNN anchor.
Yeah.
Completely got and no one talked about it.
Well, and again,
Governor DeSantis is the bad guy, right?
Well, we talked about last week we talked about Obama's birthday, right? Now, of course, now
let's talk about that.
We're hearing
that actually was a super spread.
That was a super spreading event. What, 56 something people?
Yep.
Right, they're saying now
more people there than Lollapalooza got COVID out of it.
Lollapalooza, thousands and thousands of people. At
but even there, they didn't. It wasn't considered a super spreader. But in Martha's Vineyard, it was. It's a bunch of white people. They have really bad health.
Well, my point being was that
Caucasians. I'm just saying that it's just that it just depends on the type of responsibility. It's personal responsibility.
Oh yeah.
Well, because again, it's the elitism, right? That they think that they're above and better than everybody. And to that point, Chris Cuomo apparently celebrating his birthday was seen maskless, almost shirtless, at a nightclub, dancing the night away. And so again, it's like he'll go on TV and lecture everybody about, wearing their mask and the vaccines and all this stuff. And meanwhile, they're partying it up, living it up because again, the rule
it's not what I
say, not what I do.
It's not about religion. It's not about race. It's not about any of that. It's just about people who are in these global elite groups and circles. And when you're around these people, a lot of lawyers are probably watching this. I hope they see it too because once you get to a certain level, the rules don't apply to you apparently. And I think that's not cool. I just think it's not equitable. I think that as a society, rules for one person, no matter how much money you have, no matter what race you're a part of, no matter what religion you are, no matter where you are in your social status or what you do, rules should apply equally, unequivocally, equally. However, why is it that when you saw the Texas legislature Democrats without their masks, they can go on there and have their beverages and have their private jets and have no masks and they get away with it. They're all smirking and smiling. And meanwhile, people like us regular hardworking folk, people in our viewership who every day go into work 9 to 5, work their tails off, People like my parents, your parents, our family members, our friends.
Well, karma paid them a visit
why
too,
is
because
one thing here like this
Right.
for one group of people, but then you have the Nancy Pelosi's who can walk in and get her wig done or whatever, and she's all cool about it.
Yeah.
So it's never about race, religion, creed. It's about people in power who abuse the power. You saw in Afghanistan. I know I'm going to bring that back up. Back to America. No matter where you go in the world, people who have power tend to abuse it, and it's all about our leadership. What kind of example are these people setting for most Americans? And I think that's why Americans are waking up, and that's why the midterms are coming. And I think you're going to see a big sway of Americans who are realizing, hey, inflation, gas prices, corruption, how we handle foreign policy, our taxes are going up, businesses are struggling, businesses are moving out. I mean, it's all intertwined. And, you know, I have a lot of friends out there watching who are Democrats and who are liberals, and I respect them. I respect their opinion. As an American, you have your right to that.
Right.
But look at the implications of your decisions when you vote in people in power who are ultimately going to shaft you because of their power.
But people get upset because they look at the governor of California. His kids aren't going to private school. His kids are going to private school. His kids there are no masks there. They've been educated this whole time.
Right.
They weren't stuck behind a computer screen because everyone
Let's talk about guns, right? People
Not even
the same
this.
thing with guns. The same people saying that guns are bad. It's like, what? Why? Would you rather be caught in a situation where you can't protect yourself because of our Second Amendment? Like the Heller case literally tells you that, like in D.C. versus Heller. But when you look at it down to actual people, like California, Newsom himself sends his kids to private schools. There was actual videos of him actually being out there, and he was literally sitting in a restaurant maskless. Yeah. Now, I know in a restaurant you got to eat. You can't eat with a mask on. But here's the thing. Why is one set of rules for one group of people, but another set of rules for the mass populace of the American people, another set of rules?
Because you're living in a world that believes that COVID doesn't occur when you're sitting down and eating, but does occur when you're standing up more than 4 feet. That is the hypocrisy of this whole situation, is that over here, COVID exists, but because we're sitting, COVID doesn't exist over here. And if I have a plastic sheet that doesn't go to the, I mean, again, this is ridiculous. And to think that, okay, those that are, and I don't want to go there, but with the masks, do you honestly believe that you're wearing your mask and gloves appropriately? That is ridiculous.
Well, again,
if you were in a normal health situation, you would go through maybe 50 masks a day.
Look, the science is plain and simple. The cloth masks don't work. The only masks that truly do anything are the N95 masks, which 99% of the people out there are not using.
Correct.
And I bring it back to a friend of mine who works at Hard Rock Stadium down in Miami. They had almost a nearly sold-out concert. We're talking about 70,000 people at Hard Rock Stadium, and he thinks that he's being safe because he's socially distanced and wearing masks in a stadium with 70,000 people.
Now, here's the first time I will disagree with both of you, and I will say that because it's from a moderate perspective. I do not believe masks will completely remove all, viruses and all of that. I get it. Because you can touch a door handle, you can put, if someone sneezes, it goes in your eye. But I do think masks do work to an extent. I think people should get vaccinated.
No one here.
It's our individual choice.
No one here is denying you getting vaccinated. No one here is saying that.
But I think with the stigma that we have with the masks, I think we need to do a better job working with our public health agencies like the CDC, the FDA. My master's degree was in pharmaceutical policy, pharmaceutical outcomes policy. I understand the regulatory aspect.
Explains a lot.
I know. Now I'm one of those guys, right? No, but all jokes aside, but it's actually one of those things where if you look at PPE and you look at kind of what goes on, it does work to an extent. But is it going to work with 100% efficacy rate? Probably not.
But then you understand. But you understand this more than anything else. Then that in normal day-to-day operations, when it comes to the hospitals, the amount of times that you're putting on and off gloves, PPE, mask occurs every time you walk into a new environment where that's not occurring in the normal day-to-day. So like, again, I have, and the wife, we have a whole bag of masks and we wear it once and we take it off and we put it in the bag to wash later on because you're not supposed to wear the same mask every single day. People forget that.
Yeah.
Again,
that's how people get sick.
And that's how people get sick. And so the
There's
best...
lawsuits boots on that right now.
The best analogy that my mother gave me was like, look, you wearing a mask thinking it's gonna stop that from occurring is like you putting the hose on through a chain link fence and thinking water's not gonna get through. Water is still gonna get through a chain link fence, and that's exactly what the analogy that you're using.
Well, again, and again, capitalism, you gotta love it, right? What did all these companies start doing? They started producing all kinds of masks. Some cloth masks and of course your medical masks and all that sort of thing. But again, the only mask that truly is going to help you in preventing from catching anything is going to be the N95 mask. And we
can go in the mask debate, but here's the thing: at the end of the day, that's a whole other conversation.
We're here to attack Cuomo.
That's
right. The man should go to jail for being Italian, because that was the excuse that he gave.
Right.
The reason why he's handsy and the reason why he's sexually harassed all these people is because Cuomo has become an Italian stereotype.
He's not perverted. He's Italian.
He's not perverted. He's Italian. What's the derogatory comment for Italian?
You're here. Your family.
No, but I just think that I don't want to make a joke out of what a serious issue. Like, because there's a lot of women on our viewership probably watching that they've probably been harassed every day, and I understand that because I have a little sister. I got, people in my life that are young women that, are good people. And you never want that precedent to be laid, especially from a political leader who runs one of the largest states in the union. That is a horrible precedent. And so I don't think it's not even about pointing fingers anymore. I think it's the Democratic Party has literally been so big on Me Too. Yet when it's one of their own doing it, why is there a different standard?
Sure.
Well, you read
because it's not about the
but
cause.
You read the report that individuals,
like with BLM.
Yeah, but that individuals that worked for #MeToo, #Human Rights were giving advice to the governor of how to get around it. And so these are the problems that we have, that these organizations that say that they are all about women's suffrage and everything else are lying to us because they know that Americans aren't going to really.
I have friends who wear like masks and they wear like a shield, like on top of it.
They're just arms of the Democratic Party.
They're complete arms and shields of the Democratic Army. I mean, our audience today, we're being responsible. Our audience at the yard sign has masks and has face shields. We do
mostly because they're ugly, but
well, yeah, we don't want to see their facial responses.
And they usually wear like a hat, like behind,
we are definitely fitting the motif of a Floridian.
All right,
so Cuomo basically gave himself a 2-week notice of a resignation, which I
really hope hilarious. The woman, though. I think it's about the woman at the end of the day. I really hope the woman get their just desserts. About the woman.
Well,
that's why it will be a civil. It won't be government. It'll be civil.
Well, and look, I mean, New York gets to save face because it just so happens the lieutenant governor is a woman, right? So
we shouldn't take away from the fact that just because she's a woman.
That issue.
Yeah.
No. But again, it kind of allows that issue to kind of go away for a little bit, or at least.
I think we should have our Congress, and I think we should have our state legislatures do a better job at mandating leadership who are governors or who are in the highest levels of power to ultimately create laws and promulgate strategies that ultimately protect these young women, these interns. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that, and you have the leaders you look up to, those same ones breaking the laws, then who are we as a nation?
But the only way that works is if you actually prosecute those individuals. Yeah, I agree.
But instead, what did D.C. do? D.C. had a slush fund, to settle sexual harassment lawsuits.
They wrote that into a bill.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's
how convenient.
That's
how
corruption.
Convenient.
All right.
They throw one Democrat on the bus. Who's that guy? Mr. Franken? Al Franken?
Yeah, Al Franken.
Oh,
they'll throw one guy under the bus every now and then just to feed the status quo. But at the end of the day, it's not attacking the systemic issue of harassment with people in power who are in Democratic leadership that continue to abuse.
And he still kicks himself the fact that he was the sacrificial lamb, literally a sacrificial lamb.
Sure, because by comparison now of all the other things that have come out since then, I mean, he was tame in comparison to all the other things.
Oh yeah, I'm telling you, the nipple rings. That's what broke it for me.
I had a great guy. His name's Joe Wicker. He said one thing. He said, "Do act to that quote that he's a church-going guy." Yeah, and he said this one thing. He's like, "Do unto others as you would want to be done unto you," right? Kind of thing. And one thing Joe said to me one time, and he's here. Look, his sign's right here. Joe Wicker, the man, the myth, the legend. But what I will say is this, ladies and gentlemen. You got to treat people how you want to be treated. No matter if you're a man or a woman, you treat people with respect. Because there's a lot of things going on in the Catholic Church. There's a lot of things going on in all these different things. But you got to be a good person.
Yeah.
And especially when you're in leadership and you're in a position of power, You cannot abuse it because it goes against the fundamental values of who we are as a country.
Again, but we've seen it multiple times when it comes to the echelon of our government, that these people think that they're more powerful and can't be touched. From the President of the United States, Bill Clinton, to others individuals that were running the government at those times, they really think that they were untouchable, and that the American public would allow them to continue to lie and lie and lie. And you know what? Our comment section is doing pretty good right now. I mean, I only saw one comment about a nuclear bomb over Afghanistan, so I think we're doing good there.
Well,
that is not the way. Not the way. Folks.
That's why I'm like, it was only one. It was only one.
Not the way.
All right. No, so I wasn't being rude, I promise. I was actually looking for the picture that goes along with our next topic. Thank you again to everybody for watching The Yard Sign, the most important irrelevant podcast in politics. Your host, as always, Jonny Torres. Joining me today, Harden, Tripathi, and Anibal David Cabrera. Trip for short. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We're having a lot of fun here, a little too much fun because we're already past the clock. But we're going to go ahead and get to our final topic of the night, which is the DHS putting out potential terror threats and what exactly one should be looking for to deem someone a potential terror threat. And so, you might want to take an introverted look and see if these apply to you. So one is opposition to COVID measures. Number two would be claims of election fraud, or the belief that Trump can be reinstated, and the belief or support of 9/11 anniversary and religious holidays. So, I mean, talk about painting a broad stroke, right? I mean, maybe as broad as possible. I mean, we've known almost since day one that this administration was truly going to make those of us that are on the right the enemy. Mm-hmm. And for DHS to pretty much literally come out and say it, I mean, it's pretty frightening, because again, and I think in a weaker government structure, I mean, this is essentially how you end up in a totalitarian state or in a dictatorship, when you basically start to leverage the government against your own people, and that's exactly what this is. I mean, they're thinking they're doing all this in anticipation of the 20th anniversary of 9/11.
You know what keeps people in power, gentlemen? Viewership. You know what keeps people in power?
Fear.
Fear. Right. You hit the nail on the head. And you know what? Midterm elections are coming up. Fear literally drives votes. The least educated people, and no offense to people who are least educated. Trump said this too. He loves educated on it, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm just making a joke there. But all jokes aside, literally, fear, it drives votes. Mm-hmm. It drives policy. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, the more educated people become and understand that they are just a proxy, the more that people understand that they actually have individual rights, the more people understand that these are not the three top threats that we have from the Department of Homeland Security that's putting out. I work with the Department of Homeland Security a lot of the time. I'm an immigration attorney. We deal with ICE. We deal with USCIS. We deal with CBP. We deal with all these different agencies, right? Interpol, all these different agencies. At the end of the day, these are not our big terror threats. Our threats go back to our preliminary conversation. It's China.
Right.
It's literally narco-terrorists. It's people when you solidify, when you have the Taliban literally going to Bagram Air Force Base and releasing Al-Qaeda, and now they join together through radical Islam, then you actually end up having very bad precedent being created from a global policy and global threat perspective. Now, we're talking about Homeland.
Right.
I know a lot of our viewership may think that, Homeland Security, they're doing all their stuff. Let's talk about the weakening of our TSA. I just read a great article a few days ago, and I was traveling recently, and I just talked to some TSA officers. I said, what do you guys feel? You realize, when things start to get okay, 20 years since we had, 9/11.
Right. And
now we're in an era where a lot of military people served their lives, gave the most ultimate sacrifice. Once we go too lax, guess what happens? When you drop the ball, when you get too easy, they had all these studies out. The DHS did studies. You know what I think the biggest threats are? I respect these potential threats. I get it. We have a great FBI, I think. We have a great ICE. We have a great bunch of different departments that do monitor our Homeland Security. Mm-hmm. However, I think the laxness of kind of where we are heading as a nation because of who we are and how we have literally taken a president and a leadership from a political and geopolitical perspective, you're seeing people putting plastic guns and getting in through TSA security.
They don't have to be plastic.
I think our biggest threat from a geopolitical perspective, from a country point of view, is China. But from a domestic point of view, is our domestic security. Our national security, our safety and security, the American people through interstate commerce and travel are going to be our downfall if we do not keep these terrorists in check. So I respect these three issues. But what I want to talk about is TSA and how we're failing in airport security. How we're letting people through
TSA has been a failure
yeah,
from day one.
but up to 80%?
Yes.
Up to 80% of drugs, weapons, and explosives
I want to talk about the
are
border.
not detected.
And I'm an
at any
immigration
time.
attorney, so I will be a little more, I think there's a lot of good people here in this country that really want to come into our country and provide value. But I also think that we are a nation of laws as well. And at the end of the day, we do have the INA, the Immigration Nationality Act. Look at our border.
No one wants.
And then we can also talk about
yeah,
illicit drugs.
Yeah, no one's arguing.
No one's
arguing legal immigration. No one is arguing legal immigration. It's when you have 250,000 illegals crossing the border in 1 month. That's where it becomes a problem because it trickles down throughout the rest of the country.
And the tens of thousands of underage kids that are still being held in various facilities, because they were sent over here.
Yeah, but Democrats
by themselves.
care about children in cages.
Yeah, until the election came, and now they don't care. Now it's the problem just magically.
But fear drives votes, right? So
yeah.
At the end of the day, why is it that we're so happy? At least the Democrats are so happy when people from countries who tend to vote Democrat come in, but when the Cubanos come in or people who have conservative values come in, let's talk about that as well. I just think that there's an issue with global security, but there's also an issue with homeland security.
Yeah.
And I see the potential terror threats. When we say terror,
Yeah.
we're not talking about Boko Haram here. We're not talking about what's going on with the Uyghur population. We're not talking about what's going on in Venezuela with Maduro. What we're talking about is people here in the United States.
Right.
And I know our viewership, some of the Democrats that I know, they're going to be like, oh, white supremacy. They're going to talk about guns and all this stuff. That's also an issue. I'm not discounting that.
Yeah, but this is coming from a panel of
but
nothing but brown
especially
people.
along.
Yeah, and we're all we're people of color.
conservatives.
I get
Right.
it. But here's the thing: when you see people who come from one country to another, and you see being in there, I used to intern with the DEA, right? My thing was, look, drugs. Fentanyl. Look at the opioid crisis. That's a domestic threat. I think that's a bigger threat. I think more people with the illicit transfer of drugs coming into our country, and I can talk about it because I worked with these agencies. I do have that master's in policy from pharma. I get it. But that education is one thing, but the practical experience. Walk into your neighborhood.
Right.
Watch those people who are on drugs. Addiction is a big thing.
It's a big thing.
And I think that's a domestic terror threat. Because when people are on drugs, when people are very desperate, they tend to do bad things out of, it's kind of like cornering a stray dog. They're going to bite.
Right.
And I think we're getting there. And it's not opposition to COVID measures, I think, is the biggest threat. Yeah. I think it's actual illicit drugs coming to our country. I think it's people who are literally through TSA checkpoints and all the horrible things that are going to happen through checkpoints that come into our country, and then young kids, young children will get their hands on. This is a new day and age.
Well, but back to your point, these measures are basically, I think it's a warning shot, right? To those of us
but we cannot afford to have a warning shot.
No, I know, but to those of us who don't support this administration, for those of us who, again, are skeptical.
I really wanted to support this administration
vaccine.
as an American, but you know what? They've continually, time and time again, failed. I'm all about bipartisanship. I'm all about working together as Americans. But you know what really is so messed up? When the same people that the American people voted in, either whatever people believe, either through a fraud election or a basic election. At the end of the day, when you have piss poor leadership, then yes, it's a cause for concern. Yeah. And that affects Americans, and either on a global scale or a domestic scale.
And more and more America, this feeds into the craziness of some people. Look, the DHA is going after your people.
Right.
They're going after people that attend religious holidays.
Right.
That's 80% of the country.
Could be everybody.
That could be anyone.
Yeah.
That's every.
I think it's closer to 90%.
Every 85-year-old dama that's going to church on a daily basis.
Well, but again,
basically.
but that goes everything from Christmas to Eid Mubarak.
I will say
I wouldn't even go that broad. I would say let's look at our Constitution. At the end of the day, our Constitution allows us values. Like there's this place called Hillsdale College. They do a really great. Hillsdale is great. I've been lately listening to all their videos
stuff.
and all the constitutional, and you really realize it's not about one religion or one race. It's more about people and understanding your Constitution. When the government abuses, especially with leadership like Biden, when you have Pelosi's, I think Pelosi's more dangerous than Biden, in my opinion.
Right.
But when you have the Pelosi's of the world dismantling our Constitution one day at a time, that is a cause for concern for the American people.
Yeah.
And I think it's up to us to vote in leadership that is going to literally, like Kevin McCarthy, he should be the majority leader.
Yeah. We're never going to get.
Unfortunately,
we're never going to get Pelosi kicked out of her position.
Right.
When it comes to San Francisco, she's always going to get elected. AOC.
Oh, that's why I always laugh when they challenge Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, it's always going to get elected. Mitch
McConnell is also a little bit, a little wary.
What are you talking about? Cocaine Mitch is by far one of the best.
He's savvy politician.
I'm going to end it right
He's a savvy politician. I'll give him
He
that.
knows exactly what he's doing when it comes to the Senate and what's happening with the infrastructure.
Thank God for him because of the courts.
But I will say this:
yes.
saying that you're a potential terrorist threat if you oppose COVID measures. I oppose COVID measures, and yet I still got tested today. I mean, that's what normally happens. If there's a problem, you get tested. And if I want to choose to wear a mask, I'll wear a mask. If I want to,
Did you get your serial number?
They didn't give. I actually did get a number, a reference number. I'm waiting for the barcode.
Or your yellow button from the mayor?
I want someone to ask for my papers. Honestly, if we can make a reference to papers,
for anybody who's
then we'll do
for
it.
anybody who doesn't,
we gotta go there.
For anybody who doesn't live here in Tampa, okay, our mayor actually had the audacity to wear a yellow button that says "vaxxed."
What is that? I didn't know.
Okay,
what is that?
It's basically just a little button. It's a yellow button that says
yellow
"vaxxed."
circle.
It's a yellow circle.
If you squint, it looks like
of all the colors, right? Of all the colors in the world,
that's the problem.
Yeah, like could she have not picked a worse color to go?
It was the worst form.
You know, it's.
I think these people mean well. I just think the way they go about doing it is just not. I think that it doesn't align with the values of the American.
I think
what is pretty crazy,
itself.
but what is pretty crazy is that and actually, Amandala actually makes a great point that Pelosi's just about 90 at this point. You know that we are going to see a large turnover in these kind of historical political figures that have been in office for most, if not all, of our lives. You know that we're going to get to witness the I don't want to
very careful with your words.
No, but
basically, you're saying we need younger
retirement. Let's
we need younger.
But we'll see. We'll see.
I don't want
see
younger
Pelosi
leadership.
leave.
We do.
We'll see Pelosi leave.
No, the
Austin.
average Republican
in
office is like 10 or 15 years younger than the average Democrat in office.
At the end of the day, it's not even about the Republican or Democrat. I think as long as there's people in office that are not going to abuse their power.
Oh my God,
I know, but
we get it. We believe in Jesus also.
My point. Okay, my point was that we're going to see. We're going to see a huge generational shift.
Yes.
Because Mitch McConnell at some point will leave office. Pelosi's going to at some point leave office. We saw John Boehner leave office.
But it doesn't do us well if we get AOC coming in and people like AOC.
No, of course
we don't
not.
have people who don't understand education.
Mitch McConnell is going to live for another 100 years, and he'll be running the Senate. He has no desire to go anywhere from there.
All right, let's try to.
It's a hell of a drug.
Let's try to see if we can knock this out in 10 minutes. It's time for the last part of our show, which we call One Last Thing.
Are we doing
as our producer?
Oh God, no.
And so it's one last thing. We covered a lot today. Really quickly, we're just going to go through one last thing that we didn't get to talk about today, but we certainly want to put on your radar for you to go ahead and look up online. Maybe something that we may talk about next week as we hear the sighs and groans coming from behind the cameras. What did we miss today, Anibal?
Behind the Kabbalah. This week in COVID news, the large spike which we were all expecting, has occurred. Now that children are back in school in Hillsborough County alone, about 400.
That's not school related.
4,000 students and about 361.
It's not school related though. It's literally the first week
of kids and students have come back with COVID. I think
come back with COVID, yes, but it has nothing to do with school. No,
sir. May I?
Because you're trying to connect dots that aren't there.
As we continue to move forward in the COVID... Get me back on camera. As we continue to move forward in this COVID conversation, we all knew that there was going to be a spike as school started and kids started coming back to classes.
The spike is not because school started.
Because they were all going to be back in there, and they were going to use that as a way to ask for mandates in masks. You didn't even let me finish my thoughts, sir, because I was going to say they're using the numbers to try to get a mandate of masks.
All right. Fair enough.
However, as we've seen in last year's numbers, we see the spike and then we see a return to normality as the school year continues to move forward. So at the moment, I see that there's going to be a form of additional school boards around the city, around the county, and around the country going to try to put more severe measures because they're using the data that's occurring now to influence and dictate policies. But as we saw last year, when there was a spike when schools started, even though there wasn't really a correlation, we will have, about a month from now, we'll see the numbers go back down.
All right. Now, again, your first time on the show. Did a great job. We appreciate you being here. We're going to certainly have you back on again soon. What's something that, a story you're following that we didn't get to talk about today?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for having me here today. I mean, it's my first time on the show. Did not know how it would go, but this is awesome.
Yeah,
we're just having a dialogue. No,
Yeah,
it's great because I think our viewership, they're learning a lot. I'm getting a chance to speak with them directly and also getting to talk to you about some real life issues that affect the American populace. One big thing I would like to talk about next time that I don't think we address is the dangers of China. And what is the impact of the Taliban and world affairs and what's going on across the world. How does it affect our security, basically, our national security?
Yeah.
How does it affect your food on the table? How does it affect your children? How does it affect your way of life? I think that's something I think more Americans are going to start realizing as this Biden administration continues to go forth with what they're doing. I think around year 3 of the Biden administration, I think people are going to really see the impacts. And you reap what you sow, America. And so one big thing is I think people are going to see, and you're always going to have those Democrats who are going to stick by their man, which I respect that. I love loyalty. But at the end of the day, when it affects your children, when it affects your way of life, and it affects the American Constitution, and it affects what the fabric of our culture is built upon, if people really study and understand their U.S. history and global policy, I think they're going to realize that this administration and this country is heading into a direction where if we do not, I repeat, if we do not catch it now, and every day that goes by, every second that goes by, we're in for a lot of hell, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
I promise you that, because here's what's going to happen. The America that I was raised here as an immigrant, that I grew up here in, is not the same America now in my 30s as it was when I was, the fundamental values of working hard for a living, doing well, making sure you take care of each other. I think we've become a society that alienates each other, that we become so divisive when we should work together. And I think what I would like to hear from the yard, from y'all, is for a next presentation that we do, is how can we get more people, constituents, to reach out to their congressional members? How can we get more advocacy where we go back to that America that we wore back in 1776 and onwards, 1787 even. Let's go back to those days where we actually.
Well, those folks hated each other too.
Yeah, but they did. But they at least, they at least did it. But they at least did it with some class.
I think I could vote. I'm a landowner, so I would still be able to vote. But I'm brown, so I don't know.
No,
17.
you wouldn't be able to vote.
Okay.
No,
well,
we've
came a long way, but we got a long way to go. But,
we are an ever-growing
but like I said, it's
experience.
not about being brown, black, green, purple. What I really think is, I think we've lost our way as America, and I think we have a lot more to learn from history. And if we continue to follow history and not learn from it, it's going to repeat again, and our children are going to be the ones who are going to suffer eventually. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, we got to really take a hard look, an intrinsic look at ourselves as a nation and as a people, and realize, have we lost our way as America, or is there a better way forward? And if so, how do we get there? And the answer to that, be more politically active, be more engaging, continue to learn, read, talk to people who are not like you, continue to learn, and be one America.
Well, and I want to add on to this by saying that not just doing it only in a partisan way, right? Because I love, all my activists out there that go out and do voter registration, work on campaigns, volunteer for campaigns.
Get involved.
Right? Those guys are all amazing. But it's when you kind of take that next level, right, and you start to get involved in what's happening at the county level, at the city level, and you start to have more kind of one-on-one time with people, that don't agree with you. I think that's when it really changes your perspective on politics. It doesn't become personal in the sense that it's us versus them. You know, because you realize that again, like you've been saying all show, we have Democrat friends and family members,
and they're not the enemy.
They're not the enemy.
Well, I think, and you know, we all make jokes and it's all out of fun and all that, but I really think if we talk to these people, why are they that way? Why do they think the way? That doesn't make us better than them. All I'm saying is we need to work together as Americans. Yes, we may always, you know, not always agree, but we may disagree on certain policy issues. But how do we meet halfway? And I know in a polarizing environment that we are in now, I think it's very important that we work together, especially because as we see the rise of the Taliban, we see the rise of China, we cannot let partisan politics or people be split. We are Americans first. And at the end of the day, as long as we're Americans first, we need to stick together. Because at the end of the day, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. I care about you being an American. Because at the end of the day, the CCP, they don't care if we're Democrat or Republican. They care that they want to take over one country at a time. And if you look at the long-term spectrum of things, this is the era, this is the time where we can actually cause systemic change in this great union.
I think what a lot of people are forgetting, and this is the reason why I love the yard signs and I always support organizations like what we are doing here, is that we are not... Everyone is... The reason why people think it's so crazy right now is because you only have the far left and the far right yelling at each other. And no one is listening to each other. Where you have moderates that think that it's okay to have... Why am I getting chastised because I have a Democrat friend? That blew my mind when someone that's running for office right now questioned why I had a Democratic friend. And I was like, are you serious? No. You don't know any Democrats? I'll tell you right now, people that go to her church are Democrats.
And that's not what church teaches us.
And that's the problem that a lot of people have. And this is the reason why we need to keep on talking. This is the reason why people like us need to be talking, need to be out in the ether. Well, all these individuals that are in the comment section.
And this is where I'll bring
the moderates to be able to talk. Because again, I might not agree with the Democrat, but I know that Democrats trying to do the same thing I want to do, is get rid of homelessness, get more affordable housing. We might disagree on how the path to get there, but we all want a better union. We all want a better country. We want to leave our children with better things, have less debt. Everyone agrees with that. Now, the path to get to it is different.
Lower prescription, infrastructure.
That's not a big deal.
Well, but again, my point being is that, well, now I forgot what my point was. Thanks, Anibal. But the simple fact is that don't let the rhetoric fool you, right? Because people become consumed by what they see on social media, what they see on the news. When you see these soundbite interviews and that sort of thing, look, these guys in D.C., they're all hanging out together. They all go to dinner together. They all have lunch together. Same with Tallahassee. They're all friends. They go out drinking. They go out to dinners and
we're all in this together.
Well, and again, there's a time and place for that debate to be had and those differences to be had. But again, where we're only getting the show, right? We get the TV cameras, we get the radio interviews, we get the sound bites. We don't see that, again, behind the scenes. A lot of these people get along just fine, and they actually like each other, and they hang out, and they mutually respect each other. So, all right. For me, I'm going to make it quick, but it'll be the vaccine passports. It continues to be an issue around the world. Italy, France, and now Quebec having major uprising, major protests breaking out in those countries in opposition to the vaccine passports. And, of course, various states, cities throughout the United States considering vaccine passports, even our federal government. And there's even an article about a restaurant in Anna Maria Island, which tiny island, right? But still a great kind of micro example of a restaurant that is refusing to take unvaccinated customers. Hey, that's their business. Kudos to them if that's the route that they want to go and they want to put their business on the line by taking that stance. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out or how they're even monitoring that, because again, I don't know if it falls within their legal means to even ask people if they're vaccinated.
Peppers.
That's right. But I think it's only a matter of time before, whether it's a state government, local government, or a federal government, truly puts this to the test here in the United States. I don't think it would hold up in a federal court of law, but crazier things have happened. So keep an eye on the vaccine passports, and shout out to all my friends and family in Canada who are finally standing up to the tyrannous pretty boy up there, Trudeau. That's right. On that note, we want to appreciate you for watching. Thank you for all the comments and shares. Everybody's been fantastic in the comment section today. Certainly appreciate you for watching. Don't forget, We'll have the audio version of this podcast up soon over at the Tech Overlords at Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. On behalf of Anibal, David Cabrera, Harden, Tripathi, thank you so much again for joining us. This has been The Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.